Imagine this, an app that allows you to never think about tax again.
We were down to a couple of $1,000s in the bank account with payroll about to go out, and we literally just had nothing.
The couple on a mission to make accounting easy.
You're going to have failures, there's going to be hardships, but the rewards, if it does work out, are just huge, but you won't know if you don't try.
Hey there, and welcome to Imagine This, a podcast about creative people who are bringing their dreams to life right here in Wellington. My guests today are James and Claire Fuller. They are the co-founders of online accounting service Hnry. Hey.
Hi.
Hello.
Thanks for being here. And it's great to talk to you because I'm a user of your product. I'm a fan of your product. I'm constantly telling everyone that they need to get onto Hnry. So let's talk about money, because this is a real stumbling block for many people who want to get into business, want to start their own business. It freaks people out. James, why is that?
I mean, culturally, I think it's really difficult for people to be honest about money. I think there's a lot of people who get to a certain age and there's the expectation that they should already know this stuff, even though you're not really taught it in school. It's not something that people traditionally have kind of educated themselves on. And so you get to a certain age and I think everyone is just too afraid to ask because they think that everyone else has got it figured out. You just assume that everyone else just knows what they're doing with money. And it's actually, the more you talk to people about it, you realize that actually no one at a certain age or a certain point in their life, no one understands some of this stuff, and I think we're in a similar situation now, and you go and talk to friends of ours and you're like, have you got this thing figured out? And they're like, no, I have no idea.
So what is Hnry?
So Hnry is an online accounting service for freelancers, contractors, sole traders, and we take care of all of your payments and invoicing. We're your accountant. We lodge all your tax returns for you, and we also provide you with right-sized software for all of your needs. So for raising your expenses, etc. So we are one of New Zealand's largest accountancies, which is kind of strange for Claire and I because neither of us have an accounting background. But yeah, we're effectively we kind of Hnry is a tech product that kind of automates tax for the self-employed.
So Hnry creates a bank account for you, and all of your pay goes into that bank account. What then happens?
We automatically calculate, deduct, and pay all of the right amounts of all of your taxes and then immediately pass the remainder on to you.
It's amazing to me that given how much angst there is for people around finances, that this product hadn't been created sooner. I mean, why did it take so long? Why was it so many years, even once tech capability did begin to emerge, that people still just accepted the fact that they had to have an accountant?
I think it's hilarious because it's one of those things that we just assumed when we first started out self-employed, we just assumed that other people had already solved this problem, kind of like, back to what we were saying originally and just assuming everyone's got it worked out. We created a couple of spreadsheets to just work out ourselves how much money we needed to set aside for tax. And it was only in talking to other people and actually being honest about the fact that, do you know what you're doing here? Do you know what you're doing? That no one was no one had solved this problem properly. And back before Hnry, self-employed people had to get, as you say, traditional in-person accountant plus paying extra for software and doing all of this fiddling about in software all day. And then, you probably get you have to go and pay for an extra bank account or even run your own spreadsheets on the side. And so, yeah, the idea of combining all that together and saying, look, we can be, we can provide accountancy services, we can provide the technology all in one place on a pay-as-you-go basis. I remember the first time I ever pitched at a startup event, and it was back in sort of 2016, I think. And I came off the stage, and a guy approached me at the back, and I won't tell you the exact word he said to me because I'm sure you'll need to bleep it out. But he said, I had an idea similar to this a few years ago, and I never did anything about it. And I think that's the difference is taking the chance to do something about it and saying, okay, yes, I can't find anything out there where someone's solved this problem. Maybe people have had the idea, but they just never executed on it. They never actually took that chance to see if it would work.
So let's backtrack and talk about where your idea initially came from.
So we moved back from the UK. And so the first gig I got essentially was a contract within one of the government departments. And my sister's in financial services. So I'm like, I don't know because they said, do you want to contract as a company, as an independent? What do you want to do? And I'm like, I don't know what the difference is.
So you hadn't contracted before?
Never contracted before. The recruiter's like, can't help you. So I'm literally wading through. My sister was like, I've got a dormant company. Why don't you contract through that? So it was all like feeling a bit flash, going through that side of things. I was using a PAYE calculator to try and work out what my tax was likely to be so I could put that money aside. I think got to the end of the first year and got an ACC bill, which literally had no idea that was something you needed to pay as an individual.
No one tells you that, right?
No one tells you. And the IRD obviously don't volunteer this information. Unbeknownst to me, they actually pass the information when you file your tax return directly to ACC. So literally, it was about 6 months later, this invoice arrives. It was not small, bit of a shock. Meanwhile, James had gone out contracting as well. So he was sort of trying to do the spreadsheet to combine both of our incomes and the fluctuating nature of it. So I think I sort of say I was probably like customer number one, because as soon as the spreadsheets were up and running, I'm like, well, you can just take care of mine then. So that's where we sort of discovered the need that people are quite willing to outsource, to not think about it.
So neither of you had an accounting background. James, you had worked in tech strategy. You mentioned this decision point that anyone with an idea comes to around, am I willing to take this leap? Am I willing to talk to other people, to workshop this, to validate this, to start it as a side hustle or a hobby or whatever the case may be? Why did you make that decision? Why did you turn this into an actual business?
Well, I mean, I think, almost kind of following on from Claire's story, it never started as a business. We didn't set out to, when we looked at these spreadsheets, we never for a second thought, hey, let's grow this into, Australasia's fastest growing accounting firm, because no one needs that kind of glamour in their life. But I think it was more when we had friends of ours who came out of permanent employment and went contracting, and they were good enough friends that they had honest conversations with us and said, well, how do you deal with all of this tax nonsense? And just talking to them, it sparks something of, actually, this could be a thing. And I was at the time doing a lot of work in the startup community, and a lot of it is when you're around people who are so open to what could be and the possibilities, it's quite infectious, and it's quite difficult not to kind of get excited and go, we were surrounded by people who were literally starting with nothing and going and testing whether anyone else also had that shared vision or also needed a problem solved. And so, yeah, we just started with we just said, look, we'll give this a go. It's evenings and weekends. It's not like it's going to be kind of something we're going to quit our job straight away for. But we started with like a one-page website and a $100 Twitter ad campaign. And we were like, well, let's just see if anyone else has this problem.
I think it was literally within 24 hours, somebody had put money into the bank account.
Really?
And it was like no idea who we were. We had no online presence. And it was like, oh my God.
And they were
the trust, but they were so desperate to just hope that this could be something that they were willing to take the punt and actually just sort of hope that it all figured itself out, which it did, obviously. But
I mean, we ran for probably the best part of a year and a half, just with, we carried on our day jobs and we were still supporting customers during the day and then doing the website in the evenings or doing like tax filings and various other things. It was very much kind of, I always say it was a hobby that got out of hand. It was very much this sort of evenings and weekends thing that it literally took us maybe a year and a half before we then got to a point of saying, well, actually, how big a thing do we think this thing could be? Okay,
but in the beginning, there was no app, there were no algorithms doing this stuff behind the scenes. So were you doing this manually?
So there was lots of manual effort. Even when we had a website, when people signed up, it would just email their details. The website would just automatically email us, and we would copy and paste it into a spreadsheet. And then the spreadsheet, we're big spreadsheet people, so we kind of had a few formulas in Excel that would work out people's tax rate and things. But for like a year and a half, all the payments were manual. I was,
Yeah, for every pay that comes in, there's about 5 transactions that need to go out. And so there was just lots of copying and pasting numbers into internet banking to do the transfers.
But was there resistance in the beginning? Were there people who said this won't work or this isn't how we do things?
Oh yeah,
for sure.
Not IRD though. I mean, but it was sort of, I think it was some of the earliest conversations. I remember we went to a lawyer before we even started, and we went to find out whether there was any kind of law that would either allow us or forbid us from paying taxes on behalf of other people. And I remember this lawyer just kind of said, I have no idea. Like, there's no, like, it's not like a legal precedent for it.
But we had accountants who had actually gone to partner with originally, who then paid other accountants to trawl through what we were doing to prove that we couldn't do what we were doing,
Really?
Yeah.
Which obviously was not successful. So it was just because you've just disrupted a whole industry, which has become, like, there was very much the status quo and everybody kind of knew where they were playing.
Yeah.
They just weren't ready for it. And I think, seeing two people who were not from a traditional accounting practice do this, you've got friends who are accountants who told you that this was a really dumb idea and wasn't going to go anywhere.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And it's, it's quite funny that I'd completely forgotten that we'd had that conversation. I had a couple of friends in the car and we were driving past, I think it was up on Cuba Street somewhere, and one of them turned to me, and this was a few months ago, and he said, "Hey, do you remember a few years ago we sat outside that pub and you told us about your idea and we all told you how stupid you were?" And they were like, "Yeah, that kind of worked out all right, didn't it?" Because this was what, like, our first experience. Mainly the people who said you can't do it it was the traditional accounting industry. So as Claire said, I think one of my favourite moments in the very, very early days of Hnry, we went to a traditional accountant and we said, "Look, would you do the books for this business? We're taking care of all the customers, but we just need someone to do the books for our company," which was you and I at the time, unpaid. And I described to them what the business was. I said, we're using technology to automate tax for the self-employed. And I remember this partner at this accounting firm, it was sort of Friday afternoon about 3:00, and she just said, "You can't do this." I said, "Oh, yes, I can, because I've got all this technology and we've worked this out, blah, blah, blah." And she said, "No," she said, "you can't do this because that's our business. Like, that's what we do."
Oh, right. So you're trying to hire her to do your own books.
Yeah.
And she points out that you're effectively stealing her business.
Yeah.
And then a heated conversation ensued. And then I found myself summarily marched out of their offices. And I was standing on the street, and I remember phoning Claire and I said, "I've just been thrown out of a traditional accountant." I said, "This is fantastic." I said, there's no better testament to you doing something that is going to be successful than finding out that a large incumbent in the market is annoyed because you're going to come and take all their business because they see the writing on the wall.
So you found this amusing. You didn't feel intimidated at all by these kinds of reactions?
No, it's actually, I think that's what spurred us on. It's like, it's now a great highlight for us when another accountant will try and lodge a complaint with IRD about us, because they're sort of like losing customers to us. And so then we get investigated by IRD because they've got to follow up the complaints. And then they have to report back that all is well. They've not found anything.
But there's also a great lesson in here for sectors or industries that fail to innovate, that believe that the model that worked 5 or even 2 years ago is going to carry them into the future. And this is how they react when one party comes into the market and chooses to disrupt. So what about people who are listening to this who have an idea that is similar to yours? It's a disruptive idea. It's going to shake people up. What would be your advice to someone in that position?
The thing that I'm always really clear about when I talk about, where we started with Hnry is that, if you've got an idea and you've got a disruptive idea, that doesn't mean that you literally have to pivot your entire life and quit your job and go unpaid in order to make it work. You absolutely should take that idea and you should go and test it with people. And that costs nothing to talk to people, to go and road test your idea with some people. It costs nothing to maybe try and line up a few meetings to speak to some people about what you're trying to do. And, all too often, and it doesn't matter whether you've got a disruptive idea or you just want to start earning independently, all too often people just assume that they will have to fundamentally change their life in order to do it. Whereas actually with Hnry, it very, very much grew organically from how do we just test this thing evenings and weekends as a hobby. And, I would recommend that everyone kind of does that same thing, which is you don't need to literally quit your salary job and go full-time selling jam or whatever it is, whatever your dream is. You can build into it over a period of time when you're confident that the time is right to make that leap.
Yeah, you've got to be willing to hear the feedback as well, though. So it's sort of, we've seen many instances of people are so firm on their idea and that this is going to be the next big thing that they're not receptive to people telling them that even in its current form isn't meeting the need, but a slight pivot one way or the other might actually sort of fill that gap. But if people are telling you this isn't something that they would need, then that's quite different. And I think it's being able to recognise where you've got to back yourself and push it, but also be willing to sort of walk away from it if it's not working.
So tell me about the relationship with your customers. How has the product evolved on the basis of customer feedback?
It's all customer driven.
Yeah.
We don't have anything in the app that hasn't been requested by customers. It's a service for them. The app is for them. I mean, we started out, we were just doing 9 to 5 government contracting where you were at a bank. So invoicing wasn't a thing that had even occurred to us, or quoting, or even the expense side of things. This has all sort of been organically grown based on customer feedback. Like, that's just top and central for everything that we do. Is building for, because there's no point us just sort of making up stuff if people don't actually need it.
So how do you create a brand and a culture where your customers feel that they actually do have a voice, and that if they're going to make time to offer suggestions or provide input, that that's actually going to be listened to and it's going to be read by a real person?
Well, I think one of the advantages we had in the early days, which some people might not consider an advantage, is that we didn't have any technology. We didn't have any sort of fancy app or anything like that when the service first started. So we relied upon just delivering great customer experiences, great customer service. And that meant talking to customers directly, not just expecting them to log into a faceless app. You know, it's actually, we built relationships with our customers that was very much two-way. It was very much, you know, how can we better help you? What are the things that we can do? And we've carried that absolute focus on customer. We've carried that through to where the business is today, where, you know, once someone's been with Hnry for a short time, we ask them if they want to get involved in our beta trials, where we kind of test out new features, and, you know, we invite customers to give us feedback on regular intervals, because, you know, even as Claire says, if there are people who say, oh, well, this bit doesn't really work that well for me, like, you need to hear that feedback. You need to take it all on, not just listen to the people who say, you know, this is fantastic, I think it's a great service. You've got to hear all of the warts and all feedback of what people think.
How many customers have you currently got?
So New Zealand, we're in the tens of thousands now. I used to know everyone by name, and back in the day, and now with tens of thousands of customers, I don't, which I'm ashamed to say.
It's when you see a name of an original customer pop up and you're like, oh, you're still here.
And then Australia, we kind of launched in the Australian market early last year. So I think we've got a good few thousand in Australia at the moment. That's growing incredibly fast.
Yeah, I think the key thing for us too is not scaling too quickly, because you've got to sort of refine it out. And whilst it's very, very similar in Australia, there are nuances to it. So if you go too fast, you're going to degrade the service for customers. So it's actually about, again, getting the team stood up there, getting them up to speed, building out the app, and then it's just like floodgates open once it's hit.
So let's talk about growth, because it is tricky to grow at the speed that you have grown. Has that created some challenges?
Oh, I think it's always been a challenge, even from back in the spreadsheet days. You know, we always kind of talk about hitting the rev limiter of, you know, because when you start with nothing and you bring on a whole bunch of customers, you've got no automation. And, you know, talking about kind of doing manual payments, there were times that I was doing, 80 to 100 payments a day manually into internet banking. But it was all part of the journey of kind of gaining customers to then know that it's worth investing in the automation. So for the challenge of the growth is always, how much can you do with what you've got?
So it's a capacity
It's
question.
a capacity thing. We always say you're not short of opportunity, you're short of capacity. So it's how much can you go without having to automate everything until such time as it makes sense to do so.
What do you wish that you knew 4 or 5 years ago when you started the business?
One thing I wish I did earlier, it took me far too long personally to turn off notifications on my phone. Because when you start, you are, you know, you and your co-founder are just, you're everything. You're customer support, you're watching the Facebook groups, you're doing all of this kind of stuff. And it got to a point in sort of, I'd say it's like late 2019 for me, where I just hit a wall. I was literally like, the feed on my phone would just go nuts. I remember actually sitting, I had our eldest daughter on my lap at a hospital appointment, and she just was like, your phone is buzzing continually. Like, it was like literally every 30 seconds. And I ended up talking to some good friends, and they said, you've just got to separate yourself. You've got to turn that stuff off. And then I then became really choosy about what things I would let into my kind of consciousness of on the phone. So, you know, I think the thing for me is I wish I'd done that earlier, and I wish I'd got, as things started to get overwhelming, I wish I hadn't have got to the point where it kind of almost broke me one Christmas, the kind of volume of stuff before I actually did something about it. And actually, if I'd have started earlier, I think I would have been a lot more comfortable. It wouldn't have had to have been like a big, short, sharp shock, you know, just turning everything off one day.
Yeah, I think for me it's you will get knocks, and we took them really hard and sort of can feel like the bottom's falling out and, sort of a bit chicken licking with the sky is falling. And actually 4 or 5 years down the line literally mean nothing. They sort of all help shape your journey and where you're going.
So what were some of those knocks?
Oh, really silly things. Like there was an awards thing that we got asked to submit an application for, and their form wasn't working. So I spent weeks trying to work with them to get their form working. And then it turned out that they never actually received our application. So I allowed everybody else to enter. That was fun. And that felt like, because we were desperately trying to get presence, brand awareness, all of that stuff. So to us, that felt really catastrophic. I don't think anybody's even heard of these awards now. And I don't know who even won that one. And I think it's now sort of dissolved as an awards program. It's really not a big deal. But at the time, that was the most significant thing.
Yes.
That we needed, I think, from the brand awareness. So we thought. It just literally means nothing.
So it's putting those things in perspective.
Yes, but that comes with the benefit of hindsight, that it's not a problem.
I think at the time, those are the kind of things that, and I don't think we've ever sat there and said, like, this is literally it. But I think there was there've been things where, even simple knocks that were like my own mistakes, like fiddling with the website at 1 a.m. to try and do something, and then bringing the whole website down and not having a way of bringing it back up again, and panicking because I was like, at the time we had maybe like 25 customers, but I was like, but people will be visiting this website, and I spent all night like trying to bring it back up and everything else, and 4 in the morning.
Nobody was visiting.
No one was visiting the website between 1 and 4, but you get that overriding sense of panic when this stuff hits. And I think, one thing I did a little while ago was I started keeping kind of a list of milestones, and good or bad, and just kind of keeping it updated on a regular basis. So, I'm at the point now where, as at Christmas, I think I'm up to date there, but it's every couple of months putting something on there, because then I can look back to 2017 and go, these are the things that, we thought were really bad on 2017. And it does give you a bit of that perspective. I remember we basically queued up a whole big ad campaign, across, we had Facebook and Instagram and various other things. And it had been only running for a short space of time when we got contacted by a local company that said that they owned the trademark to a word that we'd used in the ad campaign.
Wow.
So we had to pull the entire thing. And, those little knocks, when those things come in, you kind of almost need that perspective of the stuff that is big now is very different to the stuff that we thought was big, 3, 4, 5 years ago.
And in terms of the good stuff, we're usually so focused on the problems that we're dealing with that we don't actually take the time to celebrate those little wins that happen along the way. So I love that idea of jotting down those milestones and actually forcing yourself to
it's part of our culture. We sort of use Slack as an internal communication channel. We actually have a wins channel so that everybody, when they've got a little moment of joy or something that's trying to stop them being so self-deprecating, I think people are starting to get quite used to like going, I'll just put this here. And it's generally customer feedback or something that's been really positive. But it's making sure you take the time to celebrate and log all of those little moments, because there are a lot of them. And some, not every day is perfect and happy and rainbows and unicorns, but just making sure that you're recognising the work that you're doing and the contributions you're making, and just taking stock. Because I said, people will focus on a bad situation for significantly longer than I don't think a lot of time's given to the little moments of joy that we should be celebrating.
And there is one pretty big win that you've had recently, which is a $16 million investment that will allow you to grow and expand and take on many more staff. What will that mean for the company?
Oh, it's such an exciting time for us. I think there's, we had such kind of scrappy beginnings as a business, and Claire and I will always reflect on the time. It was like 2018 when we had our first members of staff, where we went out to the investment community. We tried to raise some money, and we were down to a couple of $1,000s in the bank account with payroll about to go out, and we literally just had nothing. And that was a moment that we were like, if we don't get something in, these are other people's livelihoods that we have. These are friends who've kind of come into this business with us, that, they're trusting us to keep things going. And raising money in sort of the end of last year, it's kind of, for us, there's such a sense of relief of kind of going, that's given us the runway to be able to go out and grow this business comfortably and not be in a situation where you're kind of like running out of money or that you can't hire people. Because genuinely, we see the impact firsthand of what this service means to people and people signing up to Hnry. And Claire talks about our wins channel, but the positive customer feedback where people sign up and they do get that moment of never having to think about tax again, the more that we can kind of give that opportunity for people to earn independently and do so in kind of a safe and compliant way, that's the mission we're on. We're just really excited to be able to go and help as many people as we can and try and get people to a stage where they can go out and earn without that fear of bills and, tax returns.
Well, everybody should have the right to do that. So people in permanent work have the luxury of being able to go around not thinking about tax. That should be available to everybody. And I think you just want to be able to focus on what it is that you're doing and to actually be able to do this in a way that genuinely is changing people's lives is just such a privilege for us. And I think that's what gets you through a lot of the hard times too, is because you are genuinely making a difference. So
you created this business in Wellington and you are looking to expand and go global. Why are you still in Wellington? What do you like about doing business here?
I'm from the UK originally, so I'm allowed to say that the weather here is fantastic because compared to London, everyone here whinges about the wind. I'm not fussed about that. My experience has been, I don't think we could have started this business elsewhere. I think the barriers to entry in Wellington are so low. The supportive community is a huge thing, particularly in the business community. I think people are very supportive of each other in Wellington in a way that I haven't seen in other places. So, yeah, for us, like Wellington is home, and it's just like almost the perfect mix of it's got great people. It's like the location is good. The culture is fantastic in a way that I can't see us ever going anywhere else from a sort of just personal or even professional perspective that is going to be half as good as Wellington.
What's your advice to someone who is standing at that precipice and thinking about whether to have a crack at their own business?
Do it. Nobody gets anywhere or succeeds without trying. Like you're going to have failures. There's going to be hardships, but the rewards, if it does work out, are just huge. But you won't know if you don't try. And I think you don't have to quit your day job and just launch straight in. But you start it, you test it, you grow it. And I think this is one of the loveliest things we've seen with a lot of our customers is that they came to us with what was very much a side hustle, and just watching how over the course of the years that they've been with us, that they're now earning full-time income, doing what they had built slowly and organically with support. But they've just been able to really take it because they could just focus on growing the business. But you had that luxury of just testing it out first to see whether it was going to take. And I think every big reward has to come with some sort of like hardship and struggle, in my view.
There are so many great examples of people who have just decided to give it a go and look where they've ended up. So thank you so much for being here and sharing your story, and all the best for the year ahead.
Thank you.
Imagine This is brought to you by Wellington NZ. Check out more episodes right here or wherever good podcasts are found. See you next time.